and welcome to Deeply Curious. My name is Cody Jensen, and joining me in our New York City studio apartment is my wife, Sarah.
Hello.
In this podcast, we're going to explore the defining decade, the decade between being 19 and 30, also known as our 20s.
Yes.
But before we jump into that, just want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, Hint. Hint is a water company that makes still and sparkling versions of their Hintly flavored water. It's so good. And so good for you because it's literally just water. No sugars, no added sweeteners.
Yeah. I don't know how they do it.
But it's good.
Yeah.
And if you're bored with just regular old water, grab yourself a Hint so you can stay hydrated.
Yes.
But not feel stifled of the boredom of regular old water.
Yes, because regular water is boring.
It can be. So, I would recommend the Hint Fizz Peach. It's my number one favorite of all time. We have like 5 or 6 flavors in the fridge right now of the Fizz. And like every time I grab one, I don't grab a peach because I'm like, but I want to make sure I save those.
Special occasions.
Yes. So I'm like drinking all the other flavors to make sure that the last one I have is a Hint Fizz Peach. If you want to try out, I guess, if you want to taste, if you want to check out Hint, you can do that by going to hint.co/deeplycurious. Okay, the defining decade, the 20s.
The defining decade.
The decade that we are in currently in our lives.
Yes. So the defining decade is a book by Meg Jay, and it's all about your 20s. And basically, she's a psychologist, PhD, helps people in their 20s. You know the saying, 30 is the new 20, is what everybody says, that like you don't do we're doing things later in life, blah, blah, blah. She says that's not the case. Like the 20s are one of the most important decades in like building your life and like not putting things off until you're 30. And so she just goes into, I think, there's 3 sections in the book: work, love, and then mind and body. And she just kind of talks about like the major
Hang-ups?
I guess so, yeah, the major things in each of those areas and like what you should be doing to mature in them, I guess, for lack of a better word, I don't know. But I think, well, the one that like intrigues me the most is work, because I feel like that's just like I kind of obviously know where I stand on love because, you know, we're married.
Yeah.
And then like mind and body, obviously I guess you always work on mind and body, but work itself, like I've always struggled because like I don't want work to be my entire life, but I also want to do cool things and be successful and blah blah blah. So I feel like she has a lot of insight on work things, which I feel like we're going to talk about more of today.
Yeah. I mean, I think like, I feel like those are the things that stuck out the most to me whenever I read this book, because it really pointed out the collective flaw in the millennial generation. Yeah,
there's things we do really well, but there's a few that we're so bad at.
Yeah, and if you have listened to Deeply Curious since the beginning, you've probably heard us actually mention this a couple times. But one of the biggest things with the millennial generation, those of us that are entering in our 20s now, most millennials are even starting to hit 30. But I think it applies to
anybody.
Yeah, it applies to anybody, but I think it also applies to the next generation of Gen Z.
I agree.
As well. And that is just the fact that we are stifled by choice. We have decision paralysis.
Yes, we do.
Because I think part of the root of it is that because whatever the time that we were raised in, our parents raised us with the mentality of you can do anything you want.
Yeah.
You can be anything you want. And because we grew up with that, we now entering into adulthood and into this defining decade of 20s where like you're trying to figure out who you are, starting your career and all that type of stuff. You it's decision paralysis because you're like, I can do anything I want, so I don't know what to actually do.
Right. And I think for a lot of us, it's like we're scared that making this decision means we just gave up, the 99 other decisions. At least for me.
Right.
And so it holds me back from actually making a decision because FOMO, really.
Right. I mean, FOMO, the fear of missing out, is a millennial crutch. And it is something that a lot of us, like in this generation, we tend to trade doing something for doing nothing, waiting on something better.
Right. Like we think waiting is going to open up more options or show us the right one, but it's actually stifling us in like what we're able to accomplish and what we're able to do because like there's a quote in the book. It says, "We think that by avoiding decisions now, we keep all of our options open for later, but not making choices is a choice all the same." And I think that is so key because not like deciding to wait and deciding to not make a decision yet is stifling you from creating or learning or whatever it is that you could be doing in that job or project or whatever you want to say.
Right.
Like you're just kind of like screwing yourself over.
Yeah. And I mean, also something with that is, I think a principle of success that I've like heard over time is along the lines of the quicker you fail, the quicker you succeed, because the basically if you try something and you fail, that's a learning opportunity. You try it, you failed, you learn from it, you course correct, or you try something else completely. And for some reason, a lot of us have the fear of if we try something, that's our lifelong choice. We're stuck in it now forever.
And if we fail, then we're a failure.
Right.
Forever.
And it's like, you in your 24, whatever it is. And it's like, you have this option to, I'm just going to pick some random thing, like a dog walker.
Yeah.
Or you have this other option to take an unpaid internship at this magazine. Or you have the option to go on one of those after college trips with
like your gap year thing.
Yeah. And you're like, well, I mean, I don't know, the internship like could lead to something that I want to dream, but it doesn't actually pay. And then, I mean, I really love dogs, and I could make this much money. If I do this whole summer every single day, I could make this much money that I could do this other thing that I want to do. But this trip is also like huge or whatever. It's like, but if I don't take the trip, then I might not, I don't know, meet my husband or something. Right. Or like, if I don't take the internship, I'll never be the CEO or like, right. I don't know if those are things we actually find ourselves thinking that far ahead, and like those are the reasons we stop doing it. But that's essentially what it is like thinking that not doing the right thing, or no, I guess it's more so assuming that there is a right thing instead of just doing something.
Right. Yeah, there's like a quote in Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. He talks about that. And I don't know the exact quote, but basically he's saying like, just do something and then correct course along the way. Like, it doesn't actually matter, more or less what you're doing. Like, just do something, and then you'll learn whether you're on the right path or the wrong path, and you just like switch. It's really not that complicated, but we make it so complicated because it feels like your whole life. It feels like this decision is going to determine where I go in life. And I mean, maybe that's true because you do learn lessons along the way that make you who you are, but it's not the end of the world, right? By any means.
And almost no decision in life is lifelong, except for like getting a tattoo.
Yeah.
Like
even that's not.
Yeah, I mean, even that nowadays you can get tattoo removal. So like there's not very many decisions in life that you can't course correct at some point or immediately.
Right.
Like you could literally do something,
Mm-hmm.
and the next week you're like, oh, well, that wasn't as nearly as I'm not nearly as good as that as I thought it was, or not. That's
Yeah.
not nearly as fun as I thought it was, or maybe it takes a couple years, but now you've actually had experience,
Mm-hmm.
and you can course correct from there.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, I think the just being paralyzed by decision, but then also the fear that every decision is forever.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, how do you go into things? I guess you just have to shift your mindset.
Mhm.
Like, because it's easy to get caught up in all of that, especially when it does feel like a big life decision. Like you're deciding if you should quit your job and find a new one, or if you should move to a new city. Like that's a big deal. So I don't know how do you do that without having like decision paralysis and like all of this like freak out moments.
I mean, I think it just comes from a mindset shift, a learning, like just learning the kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Is just learning those things, like becoming self-aware and becoming aware enough that you realize these decisions aren't actually as, permanent as they seem.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, I can actually say yes to this because it's really only,
Yeah, that's
going to be
true.
this summer.
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
and then I can decide, if this leads to something better or not. And I think another lie that we tell ourselves, or that is told to us in media or whatever, is that we hit our prime
Yeah.
in our 20s. And so that if we don't find that thing, if we're not at the top of our career, or if we're not, at least partial way to the corner office or whatever it is, in our 20s, then we're failures. We failed at doing that thing. And I think that is a detrimental lie as well, is that our prime is in our 20s.
It's also really depressing to think about. Like if you actually think about what that means, like if that is true, that means from 30 to 80 is just a waste of our time.
It's like if you hit your peak
Yeah.
in your 20s, then what else do you have to look forward to?
Exactly.
It's like there is,
and it's absurd when you consider it like that.
Yeah.
Like my peak is when I'm very first starting out.
in your first third of life.
No thanks.
Yeah. I have talked to many older people than me, like that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And if I'm, have a relationship with that person, I tend to eventually ask the question of like, what have your 60s been like, your 50s or whatever. And I can't even think of anybody who hasn't answered that question of like, this is my best decade.
Yeah.
Like every 30, anybody in their 30s has always said my 30s are so much better than my 20s, and 40s are so much better than my 30s. And I am sure that's not true for every single person, but in my experience of like,
Yeah.
asking, like,
I think
it seems like life just keeps getting sweeter and sweeter because you get more mature,
right.
more secure in who you are, and like,
I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
But I think that all starts in your 20s.
Right.
Like I think it starts with being very intentional about what you're doing now. Like Meg Jay says, like your 30 is not the new 20. Like you shouldn't, start to get a handle on your life when you're 30. You should start that now, and then every decade will be sweeter and sweeter.
Right. It's like the principle of that is to use your 20s to build a strong foundation to move on, like with the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I think one of the pictures of that is like the course correct that you said, is we kind of assume like, or we tell ourselves this story that, we're on a boat, and if we choose this decision, that's going 90 degrees this way.
Right.
If we choose this decision, it's going 90 degrees that way. Choose that one, it's 90 degrees in the complete opposite direction. And if we, take the boat from the harbor or whatever, it can never make it to the other destination. Whenever in reality, most like all those decisions are just a few fraction of degrees,
it's like
separated. And so it's like in the very beginning, everything is kind of going in the same general direction, but slowly drifting apart from each other.
Yeah.
And eventually, yeah, one of the decisions ends up in South America, and the other, decision ends up in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But at any point in there, you can course correct and go to a different a different destination.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps or made sense, but it just that is something I remember thinking about like earlier in my 20s of just like these decisions have a long trajectory,
Right.
and they can be course corrected from at any
Yeah.
point.
It never takes like a hard left.
Yeah. It's like every little decision ends up going somewhere really far away. And that's also, this is kind of a side note away from what I'm talking about, but it is kind of fun to also think about like, man, if I would have made this decision like back,
Mm-hmm.
back when or whatever, back in the good old days, like if I would have made that decision, like think about where I wouldn't be now or what I would be now. Like that would be weird. I wouldn't even be married to you because I never would have met you because I would have been to that place. Like,
Yeah.
it's funny how all those life decisions, like all those things in life,
Add up.
happen
Yeah.
through that. Which also, and one thing that just made me ask a question is like I just said, the good old days.
Mm-hmm.
I think that counters what I just earlier said about how, a lot of people say they're
Right.
this decade is like my best. I think there is a group of people that look back with extreme nostalgia
Yeah.
at earlier points in their life.
Well, yeah,
like
you're
the good old
like you
days.
always have the people who miss high school,
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the
That's
point
probably
is
because they were terrible people in high school and they were like super up on the food chain,
yeah,
and then they didn't actually make it anywhere in life because they didn't know how to be a decent human being.
yeah.
They didn't have character building.
I don't want to like put everyone in that box.
No, I'm just saying
but-
some people.
Yeah, but I think the point is that your 20s can be like the one of the best decades of your life, but I just don't think it's in the way we think it is.
Right.
Like there's something really awesome about being young and energetic and enthusiastic and like not scared of the consequences. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I think the point is not wasting your 20s. It's not that it's a terrible decade that is tumultuous, which I mean, for a lot of people it is. For 99% of people it is. And like you have no idea what you're doing and you're just lost and confused and whatever. But it's to take that and build on it and make it something incredible for the rest of your life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like don't just sit around and like
wish your 20s away.
Right. And just being like, I mean,
but also understand it's not your life.
Right.
Like the 20s is not your
30's
life. 30's
the new 20, which means like this decade is continued adolescence.
Yeah.
And I can continue just to party all the time.
Exactly.
Do whatever I want. And, life will just figure itself out later.
Right. Like it can be a really fun decade. And I think it's a great decade for a lot of risk in like if you want to start businesses or whatever, because you're just a little fearless. But I think it's just important to know that whatever you do in your 20s is not the rest of your life.
Right. I think so. Principles of the book that Meg like gets into is, well, I mean, that's like one of the major ones is just
building on your 20s.
Yeah, building on your 20s, not letting all of the decisions lead you to making no decision, which is worse off than making the wrong decision.
Right.
Because
you're settling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the wrong decision led you to education.
Right.
And led you to finding out what you actually like. And if you never try anything, you never actually know what you're good at or what you like doing.
Right.
And then you're just sitting around wasting your 20s away.
Yeah.
So just pick something. Pick anything, literally.
Literally anything.
Just pick something, start it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out, who cares?
I mean, literally anything.
You learn from it, and you can try something else, and you can try something else, and until you find something that you want to take onto that next step.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the first principle.
Yeah.
And I think the one that goes along with that one really well is this idea of like an identity crisis. But so in our 20s, we tend to, around 25 specifically, have an identity crisis.
Absolutely.
A lot of people do. Just really floundering, not knowing who the heck you are. What am I doing on this earth? What am I doing with my life? I need to get my stuff together, like that type of thing. And one of the things that she says is instead of having an identity crisis, start earning some identity capital.
Right.
And the thing that she talks about with identity capital and what that means is, yes, you may not be in a point where you can earn actual capital or at a place where you know can get that next big job or whatever, but you're earning identity capital by making decisions that add to your resume of life, essentially.
Right.
What makes you a more seasoned person? What builds that resume of not like jobs, of like worked at Starbucks, you know,
Right.
learned managerial skills. Like it's more so, you know, you said yes to, like back to that original example, like you said yes to that college trip, and you're like, that built identity capital because you learned how to be a team player or whatever, or you learned a
Right.
different culture,
Right.
and you were able to, you know, you stepped out and you risked something, and you built identity capital.
Right. So in the book, she says identity capital is our collection of personal assets. So this can be things like jobs, degrees, test scores, things like that. But she said it's also more personal, such as how we speak, where we're from, how we solve problems, and how we look. Identity capital is how we build ourselves bit by bit over time. And then she says, most important, identity capital is what we bring to the adult marketplace. It's the currency we use to metaphorically purchase jobs and relationships and other things we want. So it's just like learning basically your skills and like adding to that every day.
Yeah.
Really. And that can be by getting a job or, you know, by having a mentor who teaches you things. You know, like it doesn't have to be something that is like on your resume.
Yeah. I mean, that makes me think about like college entrance exam or essays, and or like if you were in a job interview, you know, and like the person with more experience type thing. And so it's like, yeah, you can have like the best grades, or yeah, you can have the best resume, but think about all of that other stuff as
Right.
well. Like that you can, you know, write in that college essay about, you know, all of this identity capital that you've earned through the course of making decisions of like starting a small business, or, you know, going on a certain trip, or, you know, just, I don't know, some charity work or
Right.
something.
Right.
And the same thing over with getting a job. It's like, hey, I have these prerequisites, but also I have all of this life experience that I already have, even though I'm only 24 or whatever it is.
Right.
It's like I've made these decisions which have allowed me to meet these people, and I've learned these things, and now I'm able to, I don't know, relate and
Creative problem solve.
Yeah, creative problem solve and all this stuff. And I would assume that the person that comes in with maybe not even the best like prerequisite resume would get the job with that identity capital.
I've actually read an article about that, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, but they were talking about how employers are starting to look at characteristics of an individual, not just a resume, because of that. Because especially I feel like now with the millennial generation and below, like we're pretty savvy and smart and we have common sense for the most part.
Yeah.
And so they were saying like skills are so easily teachable to us because we just innately know how to do things. We have so much information at our fingertips, but it's like the character of a person is much more difficult to teach now. So they're like looking at that, which is cool, but also kind of, it doesn't suck, but I am not good at that because you're sort of, well, it feels to me like it's self-praising. Like, oh, I'm adaptable because I can blah, blah, blah. You know, like, ugh, come on. Like, that's really hard for me to do. Like, when we were discussing doing this topic for the podcast, you asked me, you're like, well, what's your identity capital? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I literally, it's so hard for me to like look at my life and me personally and be like, oh, these are good qualities that other people could benefit. You know, I'm not good at that.
Well, so speaking of that, let's talk about on those two things. So decision paralysis, I think, is something that we have opposite experiences in.
Yeah.
And then our capital or social capital or whatever identity capital. I think we both can share some things that we've done in our 20s.
Yeah.
As well. So first, just decision paralysis. Yes. I think this is a conversation we had it this morning, actually. This morning we had kind of one of our weekly meetings and like figuring out like what days we're gonna podcast, film, edit, all that type of stuff, what we're gonna actually do. And so we were like making out our schedule and all that stuff, and then we started talking about you and
because I was just saying
career,
like within all of that schedule of, you know, filming and editing and podcasts and everything for what we do, I need to find time to write and to film my own videos and edit my own videos and I don't know, somehow like build up something to, I don't know. I literally don't even know. And I was just saying that it's like really hard to figure that out. And I think, what did you say? You just looked at me and you're like, I mean, just do it.
Right. Because I mean, we have that conversation all the time of just you not knowing what to do. You're like, I don't know if I should do this or if I should do this or if I should do this. And all the time, I'm like, it doesn't matter. Just do one of them or do all of them. Just do it. Like start doing something.
I know.
But we've gone years of our life with you basically asking these same questions.
Yes, because it's just the millennial problem, right? But it's not that I'm like scared to make a decision because I'll miss out on like my real purpose, because I actually know what I want to do. Like I have a pretty clear like end goal vision of what my life is going to look like, but it's just like every step in between there that is so you know, like I don't know how to get there. I can envision it, and I'm really good at like knowing what my life is going to be, but like every tiny thing that leads up to it like paralyzes me.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to like not think that. You know, like whenever I'm like trying to like, I don't know, make a game plan or a strategy, I'm like, okay, but what do I need to work on first? Like, what's the big major thing that I need to like focus on? I have no idea. And like, sure, it's just like, well, just write it and put it out there. But then you have to like go into the whole like marketing and like, okay, how do you get people to like want to read your stuff? And like, how do you put yourself out in front of people? And like all of that just overwhelms me like to no end. So
to the point where you do nothing.
I give up before I even start. Yes. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
I think, and then, I mean, part of that and all of that stuff, and something I told you, like what I told you this morning, is just like the fact that you're even thinking through, you know,
right,
all of this stuff is the exact reason why you would be able to do it, because you actually know your reasonings and you know the things you don't want to like fall into.
Right.
But
well, and that's another thing too. Like I'm very conscious of the negative effects that like being online and like super present on social media can have, and I don't want that for myself, nor do I want to perpetuate it. So I get stuck in like, how do I, you know, it's a good tool and it's awesome, and I like, you meet incredible people because of it. So like, how do you promote the like positive side of all of that stuff without like falling into the traps? So I get caught up in all of those questions, which have no answer except for that you just have to do it and correct course along the way.
Right.
I know that.
It's funny because I think I hear, well, I think even on this podcast, you have said that
What?
more than me. Like,
Yes,
of just
but
like,
mostly
just do something in correct course along the way, or like, that type of
yes,
stuff.
because I firmly believe it and I know it's true, but that doesn't mean I can do it.
You can do it. I believe in you.
But I do think that's the solution to most any problem that anybody runs into. Like, you should think about it and consider your options, absolutely. But ultimately, the answer is just to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't condone, like, making quick judgments and snap decisions because I don't think that's smart.
Yeah, you should think through it.
You should think through it. I just think I kind of get caught up in the thinking sometimes.
Yeah.
And I sometimes have trouble doing the doing.
Right. It's like I fall in the middle of there. Like, because there's some personalities that have lean more towards the propensity of just like the moment they have a thought, doing it.
Right.
And then there's like, I think like on your end of the spectrum.
Well, actually, I am capable of both if I'm in a healthy spot.
So are you unhealthy?
Probably. My whole life I've been unhealthy. But it is, I do lean toward thinking and considering options, but whenever I'm like in a good mental space, I have the capability of employing both.
Yeah. And but what I'm back to what I was saying though is like there are people maybe like you or even farther than like that get so caught up in just the thinking about doing things and planning and like all this stuff that they actually forget to do it.
Yeah.
And I think we should all like be working towards somewhere in the middle of that.
I agree.
And like thinking through it to make sure it's not idiotic.
Right.
But a little bit of idiocy.
Idiocy.
Yeah. Something.
I think idiocy.
Might be.
It's not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, there's a reason that so many people who have become successful are like, I mean, I'm not condoning that you lie and say that you know Photoshop when you don't, but I did, and now I'm the creative director of whatever. Yeah. Or I don't condone like moving and putting everything on a credit card, but that's what I did. There's a reason that that's a common story.
Like there is risk in like big things.
Although I just want to like put out a disclaimer that I don't actually condone moving on a credit card.
We did not do that. But
there's a reason that.
But I've heard that story of like many because entrepreneurs and stuff.
Yeah, because you give yourself no options but to succeed, and I think that kind of lights a fire under because you have to. It lights a fire. It's either find a way to make money or fail and, run back home. Like, nobody wants to do that.
But what I was saying is like, so I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle of that.
I
of
agree.
Like, I think about things, but I don't let the thinking about it normally stop me from doing it.
Right.
After I analyze it, or I'd make the decision not to do it.
Right.
I don't just, I rarely sit in the middle of just like, maybe I'll do it.
Yeah.
It's more like I make a decision of like yes or no.
Right.
That reminds me of just how prevalent the indecision of our generation is, in the fact that even Facebook, if you get invited to an event, they very clearly give you the option of maybe. Mm-hmm. And most people click the maybe because something better might come along.
It's true.
You don't know what you might be doing in 4 days.
It's true.
And somebody might invite you to something cooler.
Now, I have been, in that aspect, pretty good at making a decision. I never click the maybe. Because I would hate for everyone to click the maybe to me. Like, I can see the, like, how it would affect me. And so I always click yes or no. Because when you're planning a party of some sort, you have to have, like, enough food, it's, like, stressful.
It's like you have 10 people that said yes, 49 that said maybe, and 3 that said no. And you're like, okay, so do I get food for the 10 or do I get food for the 60?
Right, exactly. So in that case, I'm pretty good. I'm very easily, like, don't have, like, the decision paralysis of, well, maybe something better will come along.
Yeah.
Because that's just not a nice thing to do to people. But whenever it's myself, I'm at such a good self-sabotager, I think, is the problem.
Sure.
It's like the easiest thing in the world. It comes so natural to me.
Yeah.
But I think we should talk about identity capital, because I feel like that is maybe a little more difficult for people to identify. Or at least I have a difficult time identifying, it, because it's kind of the curse of knowledge. We've been talking about that a lot recently. Like, just the things that you know that come so natural to you, somebody else has no clue about.
Right.
And it's the curse of knowledge, where like you can add value there, but it's just you don't see it.
Yeah, the curse of knowledge is knowing something so well that you can't even imagine or fathom knowing what it's like to not know what you know.
Right.
And so you go about your day and your life like knowing something so much that you can't even imagine what it's like to not know that thing. And so you speak and do things in a way that other people they don't understand at all.
Right.
Because they don't even know where to begin with what you know.
Right.
And you don't even know where to start with what you know because you know it so well.
Right.
And so
you miss out on a lot of, I feel like, opportunities, not just like for money, but like for education and just like building who you are and like helping other people, because it's just so natural to you that you don't even see the opening, you know? And I feel like that's kind of like identity capital. Like it's hard to identify in yourself what you offer that's better or different or, you know, excels. So how do you do that? Do you have any ideas on like
how you do it?
Yeah, or like just what kind of like mental shift you have to make? Because I think it's a mental shift of like looking at everything that you do in a different way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I suffer from the curse of knowledge in a lot of that. Just because that some of this type of stuff is so innate in me that I don't even like with decision paralysis. It's almost like, you know, I tell you all the time, just do it. And I don't even understand what it's like to be in your shoes,
right?
Of not being able of like thinking about all these things and like never doing anything because of right. Because there's so much, and like then you know what we're talking about, like it's hard for me to even imagine what that's like because that's so opposite of just who I naturally am. I just do something, and so like my advice is just do it, and you're like, well, how?
Right.
I'm like, I mean, I don't even know if there is a how. It's literally just not thinking that hard and just doing it. You know? And so it's like thinking about the identity capital. I don't know what you would need as far as like a mind shift or like a mindset like change or whatever.
Well, I guess just like how do you recognize things as identity capital? Instead of just like a thing you did.
I know that one thing that I do in that is I think about what is the better story. My life is, you know, a novel. My life is a story, and if I'm in the moment, I'm like, okay. So actually, here's an amazing example. Just a few months ago, I was DM'd on Instagram by the team who runs social media for Dennis Rodman. And they're like, hey, can you come film tomorrow? Can you come film Dennis Rodman all day long for a vlog that we're trying to make? And they offered me very little money. And it was like, the first offer was so little that I did say no.
It was like kind of an LOL.
Yeah. But then they came back with still not very good, but enough that in that moment, it was like, okay, it's still not very much money, but what would be a better story for my life? Saying no and sitting at home tomorrow editing, or going and spending the entire day with a NBA All-Star or whatever he is, like,
Yeah.
or an NBA player that everybody knows,
Yeah.
Dennis Rodman, and having the story that I can tell for the rest of my life.
Right.
And it adds to my personal identity, equity,
Yeah, capital.
capital, because now I have that experience. That's like a small,
Right.
like little that's just like adding a small deposit into that
Right.
bank. But now in situations where I'm talking to people and we're like shooting the breeze or whatever, it's like I always have this thing, like this piece of identity capital I can pull out of the bank and tell people,
Mm-hmm.
and one gives me credibility.
Right.
So let's talk like professionally.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to somebody about a job situation, or maybe they would maybe hire me or whatever, and in this conversation I can say that I have been, a filmer, or I've made a film or something. I don't know. I've like done work for Dennis Rodman.
Yes.
Like that gives me a little bit of credibility in the in the space.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm doing is I'm answering the question of the mindset.
Right.
And so my mindset, I feel like I've been like this for a long time, of just always thinking about the better story. Ultimately, when this is done, what's the better story?
Right.
Because some things I can be really logical. I can be very like realist. And some things I just, the logic behind it is like, I mean, it's not enough money to be worth an entire day, but it's a way better story. And so it's like, you just kind of like just do those things.
I think looking at everything like, okay, what is this going to add to my life, is really good, instead of just kind of being on autopilot. I feel like maybe that's a little bit of my problem. Like, I know that things are going to teach me something, or like I very much can see that in like traveling, or even in like a job or a project that I say yes to. Like, well, even if whatever, it'll teach me something. But looking at that as identity capital is really hard for me. Like, I can't look at a past job and be like, oh, this is what skills it gave me. That's really difficult for me to put into words. So I think maybe like paying attention like in the moment is important. But I also feel like finding people who are really close to you, who can speak into your life from an outside perspective with fresh eyes, has always been really beneficial to me. So like if I'm having trouble specifically with like resumes, cover letters, like proposals, whatever, I usually like email my friend like, hey, can you like, this is what I need to explain, can you help me like find words for it? Because speaking about myself I'm not good at it. Like, I'm not good at being like, I'm adaptable and a great learner and blah blah blah. Like it's just so unnatural to me. It feels so fake. And so it's always been helpful to have like a friend or two who speaks into that and can point out specific characteristics.
Yeah. What do you think, looking not looking from somebody else's perspective, but looking at your life, just what do you think are some things you've done through your 20s that have added to your identity capital?
Well, see, this is really hard for me to pick anything. I mean, I can pick a few obvious ones, like moving. Not moving to Tulsa and moving to New York. I feel like are obvious answers. And then I feel like whenever I quit my full-time job, I didn't really have any plans. So I don't know if it's identity capital necessarily, but it taught me a lot of things and like gave me the space to, I don't know, like believe that I could make it without working a job that I hate. So I don't know if that's identity capital, but it was like a huge learning curve for me. And then I think like, as far as, I don't know, I guess career, taking an unpaid magazine internship was a big one and taught me a lot, and like about editing and writing and like deadlines and whatever.
And also added to your resume in the way that whenever you speak about your writing, even though it was like an unpaid internship at a small magazine, you now can without lying, like you can say like, I've written for a magazine.
I'm published.
Like, and things like that. And that also opened the door for you to write some articles for a few other small magazines.
Right.
And so you have written for magazines,
right,
plural.
But the problem for me is like, it doesn't feel like credible.
I think that more stems from your insecurity than it actually not being credible.
Okay, maybe. But that's, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, it's hard. Like, I can pick out some major like identity capital things, but like, I know that there are so many other things that I've done that have added capital, but I can't think of them. Like, I don't know how to like pinpoint like, oh, this experience gave me this, you know? But those, I think, are like the few major ones.
I mean, you definitely moving to Tulsa. I mean, almost directly out of high school, moving away from family. And
huge growing up experience.
And then helping start a church. And then staying a part of that community and, you know, diving deep into that community for 8 years.
Right.
I think is a huge like identity capital because you have so many things you learn through that.
But see, let's say even in that vein, like I've never thought about like the things that I've done as a volunteer. I've never considered that as added value in like my professional work, which is crazy because I know how to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know, but like I don't naturally think of things that way. And I don't know if it's like the curse of knowledge just because it's, you know, what you do and it's easy and it's natural, or if it's like a shift in your mindset. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard for me though. But I think that like learning how to look at every experience you have as like, what is this giving me? Even if it's a learning opportunity, even if it's not positive or like a skill, if it's like a growth opportunity, is still identity capital, I think. But it's just like learning how to look at it that way.
I think that those negative experiences can sometimes add even more identity capital than something that may be like overly positive, because that's, you know, maybe like where I was mentioning earlier, maybe you tried something and you failed. Well, now you have all of that learning process that you went through that, and you can use that to your advantage now, because now, one, you have knowledge of what doesn't work in certain scenario, but you also learned how to fail, you know, hopefully, or how to like, to change trajectory. You
take
like
criticism,
whatever. It doesn't, I guess, it doesn't even need to, it doesn't matter how specific I get, but you through that failure, you learned things.
Right.
And now that is part of your identity capital, in that whenever you're having these conversations and you are talking to other people that could possibly be somebody who helps you in your career or get you a job or whatever, you can speak out of those experiences. Be like, yeah, I actually tried this thing, and you know, I because I did this, or because the market was this way, you know, it didn't work out the way that I had planned, but I learned that A, B, and C.
Right.
And it's like, if you bring that identity capital into an experience as, you know, a 20-year-old, you're going to have so much more credibility.
Yeah. That takes confidence, though.
Yeah.
Just joking. Only a little. Okay, so another point that I think is really cool that she makes in the book is weak ties is what she calls them, and your social tribe. So your social tribe is, you know, like-minded people, same age, same maybe like life phase or whatever, who are going to like, you know, agree with you and bring you food when you're sick, and like friends, like your social tribe. But then she talks about weak ties and how weak ties are actually usually where all of the like career opportunities come from. It's like a friend of a friend of a friend knows this guy kind of situation, which I think is really fascinating. And so I kind of want to talk about that.
Yeah. And I think making, I So the point is, we can get like hyper focused and like just focus on this like our tribe, our core group, and be so entrenched in these you know centered like your
Right.
core relationship, which is very important.
Right. We're not diminishing
Yeah.
close relationships by any means.
Like, given the choice of having a bunch of weak ties or like a core group of people, like I'm going to choose core group of people every day. But that's not really the point of, you're not really choosing between the two. I'm just
Right.
like
Yeah.
throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Don't give up your core people.
right. Like
Yeah.
that is very, very important. The relationships matter,
Yeah.
you know, more than anything.
Right.
Love harder.
Don't just use people either. I think
Yes.
that's
Yeah. People
obvious.
over product.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Just
Sorry.
throwing out all our values.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, got off on a little bit of a love tangent. Anyways, but you have your core group of people, and if you never look outside of that core group of people, then you may miss out on tons of opportunity from these
Great opportunities.
weak ties, these friends of a friend type situations. And so the principle of this is to get outside of that core group and email somebody, call somebody, ask somebody, post on social media, like to help you, find something. Because typically that is where these connections are made, through getting a new job or whatever. If you think about it, like it's normally not through your closest friends who are like, oh, there's an opening at my place, but they know somebody. They're like, oh yeah, one of my, I don't know, my college roommate said that his company is hiring, I'll give you his email, and you give him his email, and like it happens that way. And that's the weak ties, like, kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's a quote in the book where she says, some are in almost constant contact with the same few people. But while the urban tribe helps us survive, it does not help us thrive. The urban tribe may bring us soup when we're sick, but it is the people we hardly know, those who never make it into our tribe, who will swiftly and dramatically change our lives for the better. And it's kind of true when you think back on your life and like the opportunities you've had. Most of them come because somebody knew somebody.
Right.
It's fascinating because I don't really think like that. I put a lot of emphasis on my people, and like I very much care about like, just making sure and maintaining and thriving in those relationships. But it's true. Like I can even look back and see how like, oh, this person who sort of knew that I did this thing called me because their friend needed something, and those are where like most of the like opportunities come from. It's not to say that they can't come from your tribe, because they definitely can. I've had a few of those too. Like in fact, the magazine internship that I did came from a close friend who asked if I could collaborate with her on an article, and then that led to me meeting the founder and blah blah blah. So it does happen, but I think the majority of the time it's weak ties.
Yeah. And I think like it can be hard to kind of think about the practical application of that, but maybe in it here
I think it's kind of organic, right?
Right. But I think here I thought of like maybe something that can paint a picture of that is saying yes to those people who reach out and like, hey, do you want to meet up for coffee?
Yeah.
Because a lot of those are so hard to be like, I mean, I barely know this person.
Yeah.
Like, it's so like, why do I want to like give my time? It's like, what am I? It's not, you think about like, I'm not going to become best friends with this person. Like, I would rather just continue building this relationship, that I've already been building, instead of like meeting with coffee or whatever. And so it's like, sometimes it's, saying yes to those things can lead to stuff that you never thought of, or you never thought would be possible.
Right.
Or whatever. And I have two prime examples of weak ties, and it even comes into identity capital. So one specifically is like just recently a weak tie that we had from Tulsa was coming through New York and was like, hey, do you guys want to like go for breakfast? And I was like, sure, like let's do it. we've hung out like once before, so it's like we didn't really know each other necessarily, but it's like we're in similar fields, and from Tulsa, why not? We can just
Mm-hmm.
like hang out. No, like no thought of anything other than just like hanging out.
Right.
Show up, start talking about like what we're doing and jobs and everything like that, and that led to us now doing a job together
Right.
in a month.
Yeah.
And it's like that was in no way, either one of us thought, that was where that was going to lead. It was
Right.
literally we kind of know each other. I'm in the city you live in now. Let's like meet up. Like, okay, I said yes. And now, I'm going to do this job, which maybe that job could lead to something more.
Right.
That it happens. I don't, you just never know.
Right.
So that's an example of like a weak tie connection.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of what she's talking about, that like so many opportunities, the things that dramatically shift and change our life typically can come from those weak ties. And my other example brings in identity capital into it as well, and that is the fact that just 2 months ago, a weak tie that I had from Tulsa again. So we're connected to these people who went to Oral Roberts University,
Mm-hmm.
and so through now we live in New York. We had these connections. One of those people ended up getting a job at ORU, and he was a part of a department that was looking to have a video made for their department. They had hired a guy, and that fell through. And he was like, "Man, who could do this?" And he like remembered me, and one of his weak connections contacted me. He's like, "Hey, this is way last minute, but can you next month
Mm-hmm.
go to Africa for 2 weeks and film this video? By the way, you're not going to make very much money." They didn't have a very big budget for it.
Right.
And so in that moment, it's like the weak connection thing. The weak connection got me the opportunity. Then I sat there and I talked to you about it, and just thinking about, not in these terms did we talk about it, but the identity capital of this decision.
Right.
If I go do this, I'm not going to make hardly any money off of doing this.
Right.
But one of my best friends is going to be in the same place. So I get to go and hang out with my friend in Africa. So that's awesome. Two, what story am I going to be able to tell
Right.
through this? What, am I going to be able to provide through the like, what, yeah, just what story is like going to come, like that I'm going to be able to tell through that. And because of doing that, one, I got, I had a lot of fun doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I shot some of the best stuff I've ever shot in my life. I made the video for them, which like they absolutely loved, and that's now part of my resume.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, I made a short documentary about the community that I had worked in for 8 days to be able to put on my YouTube channel, which is not something that's going to be like, go viral and like, it
Right.
makes me a bunch of, YouTube monies, but that's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that me doing that and putting it out there now adds to my identity capital, in that I'm doing this not because I'm like looking and chasing after all these views, because if I wanted that, I would have sensationalized the whole thing. But I want to tell the accurate and beautiful story of this community through a short documentary, so that now I've made a short documentary that I'm
Mm-hmm.
very proud of, and maybe a weak connection will see that short documentary, see that I have this equity, this
Mm-hmm.
social capital,
Abilities.
and things like that, and lead to something larger for me to be able to do something like that again that has a bigger budget,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So it's that decision paralysis could have been involved in all of that, to be like, oh crap, okay, this is a month away. I'm not really going to make money. Maybe I'm insecure about going to Africa and like being in this
Right.
country, in this place that I don't know anybody. I don't know what it's like to be there, and like thinking about all these things that could be, what am I going to miss out if I'm gone? Like all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But instead choosing the identity capital, choosing the better story to live.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it all comes down to that. It's just like looking at your options or looking at your opportunities and just saying which is better, which is a better story. I mean, maybe it's that simple.
I also think, though, it could be just saying yes more.
I do think that, like, I understand, like, I understand the argument of saying no and, like, valuing your time and things like that. It's a valid argument, but I think that we should consider what our no's mean.
Yeah, I almost think, though, that I think saying no, you need to know when to say no.
Yeah, it's like intuition.
But I think that in our 20s, I feel like maybe sometimes we get arrogant and we think that we can take these life principles of, the 30s, the 40s, the 50-year-olds that we hear this stuff about, how they have reached a point in their life where, that because of the career and the relationships that they have with their family and everything like that, they have had now to learn how to say no.
Right.
Because whenever they say yes to something, saying yes to this thing means that I'm actually saying no to time with my family or saying no to this project that I'm working on, because there's no more, there's not a whole lot of margin in time, in their life anymore.
Yeah.
Well, when we're in our 20s and we have sometimes, I mean, this isn't everybody's story, but a lot of 20-year-olds have an abundance of
We have lots of time.
And so it's like, I think sometimes we can be arrogant in like saying like, well, I say no because I need to protect, like, whatever it is. And that's not to undermine that principle at all, because I think it's very important.
Yeah.
But I think in our 20s, we just have so much of this time that we may in the future not have as much of.
Yeah.
And so saying yes to things more, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, like you kind of said, like, you need to know when it's right to say no. Like, you have to, I think it's like intuition, right? I feel like most of us can feel when a situation is like good or bad or something that we should be doing or not be doing, or, whatever, saying yes or saying no. I think most of the time you have like a gut feeling about it. And then when you start thinking too much is when you start questioning all of that. But for the most part, saying yes, specifically saying yes to people, has never been bad for me. Like, if somebody asks to go get lunch or whatever, like something like that, or if they ask if I can help them like package something at their business, like whatever it is, like saying yes to people has never ended poorly for me.
Yeah.
I think that's important to remember too.
Yeah, especially if you have the intuition, I guess maybe the right word, of not letting yourself being taken advantage of.
Right.
Because there could be some people who over ask.
Oh, absolutely.
And never reciprocate or compensate or whatever.
Absolutely. And that's happened too. And you
right,
cross that bridge whenever it comes. And you're like, hey, look.
But specifically about weak connections, like if it is a weak connection, they're not really taking advantage of you because you're not like, you're not asking all the time. But yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, saying yes to people is sometimes the hardest, because you just, I don't know, meeting new people is awkward.
Yeah.
And you just, there's all of that insecurity that comes with all of that.
And it could be nothing against like meeting people is awkward or whatever. Like, you just could be comfortable and like happy like where you are. But it doesn't mean you should always stay there.
It's like, if I say yes to that means I'm gonna have to like get up.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even like just welcoming people into your life. Not in a I don't want that to sound like you're being exclusive, but I mean, it's true. Like, you have your people and like you're fine with that, right? And like saying yes to this lunch or coffee could mean that they want to do this on a regular basis, and then I have to like figure out how to, there's that whole comfortability or uncomfortability that comes with it.
Right. And I think also
putting yourself out there.
That comes that made me think. I think that also plays into a problem that I feel like the millennial generation generally has as well, is not being able to be direct. and not be
so bad at
conflict is what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
because let's say the reason that we may not want to meet with this person one time is because we feel like they're going to want to be best friends and we're going to have to turn them down in the future. And so that
or suffer through
right.
so many coffee dates that you don't want.
Creating this worst case scenario
Yeah.
Of having to deal with this conflict makes us say no to the first initial meeting.
Right.
And it's like, yeah.
You have no idea what's actually going to happen.
We could definitely have an entire other show about avoiding conflict.
For sure. Yeah.
But yes, continue.
I just kind of want to like end the podcast with this quote because I just really like it.
Cool.
She said, "Sometimes making choices feels like planning for my life in a way that seems boring. Sometimes making choices to pursue things that seem like good fits or that match my interests seems boring simply because it makes sense. I find myself wanting to go off in an unexpected direction. Arabic, Cambodia. I know this is a sort of crazy impulse. I know that the way to live a good life is to pursue things that are not only interesting, but that make sense." And I think, just to remember that, like, the fact that, like, a lot of, like, the good parts of life, like, are boring, like, or require really mundane tasks to achieve it, like, I don't know. I always put everything into perspective of travel because it's just what I want to do. So, like, going on a trip is, like, leading up to that, the worst stuff ever. Like, you have to, like, plan dates and times and airlines and packing lists and, like,
getting extra work done because you're going to be gone.
Right. It's not fun, it's like very mundane, tedious, boring stuff. But it's what, like, makes a good life. So I think, like, just remembering that too, that, like, just because, and I think especially with social media, like, just because everybody else looks like they're having fun doesn't mean they're not doing the mundane, boring things too. Because, like, it's just as mundane to, I don't know, be a famous Instagrammer who has to, like, follow algorithms and crap as it is everything else.
Yeah. We've been talking about this for a while. This was a little more serious than
I know, it wasn't
the last
quite as fun. Sorry, guys.
Two. So thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you got something out of that in this serious conversation. Mint, like, got some meat out of it, some things you're thinking about.
Yeah.
Get a little more curious about. And to put myself out there and maybe get a little more social equity capital. I keep saying equity.
Identity capital.
Okay. I've been, like, messing that up this entire time.
Yes.
Identity capital to, get myself out there, maybe earn a little bit of identity capital. Announcement that I teased in the last episode is I actually put together some Deeply Curious merch that you can now buy. And you can do that. Check it out by going to shop.codyjensen.com. There's also a link in the description. Have a couple different shirt options and in a few different colors. They say Deeply Curious. One that I handwrote.
Actually, I think handwrit might be British. That sound. I really hope that doesn't make me sound ignorant because I don't know that at all.
Well, either way, I got it wrong one of the times. So, I took a pen and some paper and I wrote it down. Then I put it on a t-shirt. The other one is a graphic designed logo that I also did. The Deeply Curious logo, you can get either one of those by going to shop.codyjensen.com. We would absolutely love if you check that out and you are repping Deeply Curious, just letting people know, I'm a deeply curious person.
Yeah.
And I also put a non-Deeply Curious shirt out on there as well in a couple different variations. Also, I wrote something down and I put it on the shirt. I hand drew it.
Yeah.
And it says "Love Harder." If you didn't get that out of the podcast of why it would say "Love Harder." So I mean, we want to constantly be people that are for people.
Yeah.
And that put people first.
Positivity.
And so that is the brand that we want to, that we are creating and have created of just like, of just empathy,
Yeah.
love. And so
Kindness.
I just want that to be like, kind of one of our things is love harder.
Yeah.
So if you, again, check those out, shop.codyjensen.com. Also, you can help out the show by buying the book. If you're interested in buying The Defining Decade, you can use the affiliate link that is in the show notes.
Yeah.
Last thing is a huge thank you again to our sponsor, Hint. If you want to check out Hint Water, you can do that at hint.co/deeplycurious. Thank you guys for listening. We will see you next Tuesday.
Bye.